Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sustainable Broomfield's speaker series presentation. We're really excited to welcome some folks from Smart Commute Metro North. There's Carson Priest and Catherine Sanders, and they have a nice presentation for us about smarter commuting options. So we're just going to let them take it away and enjoy their presentation. And I think we're going to have time for questions at the end, but I think if you have a question intermediately, just go ahead and kind of butt in and just ask it as we're going along, if that's all right with you guys.
Absolutely. I think I'll keep an eye on raised hands or just butt in, please. I have no problem with that, this small of a group. So I'm going to screen share my thing here and move my windows around so I can see everybody. All right. I'm Carson Priest, and pending, I guess we're past 5 o'clock. This is my first, I guess, full day as Executive Director here at Smart Commute. So I'm joined by our Deputy Executive Director, Catherine Sanders, and she'll be giving a presentation a little bit later on this back end of this about a very specific program about our carbon footprint analysis, which may be more interesting to this group than some of the other random things we do. But I'm going to give a high-level overview of everything that we do here at Smart Commute. And like I said, please ask questions if you have them, but I will try to keep it interesting. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit focused on transportation options here in the North Denver metro area. I'll show you a map in a minute about what that actually means. So our focus area is the North, and we serve roughly, give or take, 157 employers in this area, representing almost 30,000 employees, and that continues to grow kind of every year as the North region grows. We serve 13 different jurisdictions spread out across this region, representing roughly 750,000 folks, 720,000 residents. Our primary work is split into two categories every year. So we service employers with a lot of resources for their employees, program ideas, things to get people out of their car alone and trying other modes of transportation. And then we focus also on the commuter or the resident, so that more individual level of service. And that can feature things like bike to work day, advocating for better walking infrastructure, et cetera, kind of across the North Metro. Here's that map I promised. So we are this really large piece here at the top. We kind of stretch from Longmont on the north end down to roughly I-70 over to Brighton and then up. These other darker shades are different organizations that are funded by the same grant that do exactly essentially what we do. So we are a transportation management organization, a TMO, and all of these other ones are also TMOs in the Denver metro region that service a specific area. So Downtown Denver Partnership is a good example because it's obvious they service the downtown business core, whereas we service this larger area up north, primarily focused on that I-25 piece right down the middle, and obviously east and west of that, advocating for mobility options. Just a little glimpse of kind of who we are from a board perspective. We have 11 board members this year. Our chair is Jessica Sandgren, the mayor pro tem of the city of Thornton. Our vice chair is Wadi Burgos, the parking and TDM coordinator with Westminster. And the treasurer is Gene Putman, who actually founded our organization with a few other folks 10 years ago. This is our 10th anniversary this year, which is a big milestone for us. So this is the rest of our board. It's made up of a lot of private sector folks like Google individuals, developers like McWinney, and then other folks kind of across the spectrum. I need to give Craig Hebrink a special shout out here for Sustainable Broomfield. We put him down at the bottom because he was our latest board member. No, there's no alphabetical order here, just how you joined, but he's very kind to both organizations here and a good member for us as well. So we have our board, and then here's our membership partners, the ones that we work with kind of on a regular basis that provide us the funding we need for local matches for a lot of our grant and just programming money in order to help us do what we do. That includes jurisdictions that I'll hit on in just a second: the Adams County Regional Economic Partnership, Amazon, the Broomfield Chamber, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, the Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council, which is focused on mostly older adults and those needing special attention with their mobility. Downtown Westminster Parking Garage, E470 Public Highway, a few different developers and consultants in the construction world kind of strewn about this list. And obviously Sustainable Broomfield down at the bottom again, because you were our latest member. No alphabetical order here. Here are those jurisdictions that I just mentioned at the top. These are the jurisdictions that we service and that are members of Smart Commute through something called NADA, which is the North Area Transportation Alliance. This is a 13-member list of these folks that come together to talk about transportation funding opportunities and mobility options kind of in the North Metro as a whole, so they can get in the room and talk to CDOT and RTD about what the issues are right now and how they can better the entire region as a whole. So that includes Adams County, Brighton, Broomfield, Commerce City, Dacono, Erie, Federal Heights, Firestone, Frederick, Longmont, North Glen, Thornton, and Westminster. So a large area. I know this is a lot of text. I'll walk us through it here, but this is when I said earlier that we are focused on both employers and commuters. Those two different categories is primarily what we do. This is that work that we do in those categories. So I won't touch on this one because this is Catherine Steele, but we do a comprehensive site-based commute carbon footprint analysis for employers. We provide information about available regional grants and free consultant services for evaluating on-site EV charging stations as we encourage the adoption of EVs in the North Metro area. We can provide a cost-benefit analysis for carpooling, van pooling, biking, walking, or taking transit, all versus driving a single occupancy vehicle. So a lot of times what we do is make the business case for getting out of your car and driving alone and taking one of these other options and saying that it's better for your health if you're going to be doing an active mode like biking or walking, but it's also cheaper if you're going to end up doing carpooling or van pooling or taking transit a lot of the time than maintaining a single occupancy vehicle and dealing with traffic every day. So a lot of times that's one of our more powerful tools in terms of getting people out of their cars and trying something else. We provide technical analysis, guidance, and support to businesses for an employer trip reduction program that might be mandated in the future. So this was something that came about last year. There was going to be a trip reduction mandate that was going to make large employers minimize the amount of trips that their employees were taking in cars alone. And we're still providing guidance for people to do that every day. We want people to minimize the amount of trips they're taking in their car alone. So we still provide that analysis for folks, those that want it, even though it's not mandated. We do customized policies for hybrid work schedules, flexible work schedules, and compressed work week schedules. So that includes both working from home and working in an office, which seems to be the new norm. Those flexible work schedules means maybe you can come in at 7:30 and leave a little bit earlier, or vice versa. And compressed work week schedules essentially means you work 4 days. This is an example, 4 days a week, 10 hours a day, and you can take off that Friday every other week because you have accrued enough time to do so. This gets people out of their cars and driving every single day, which is something that that's our number one goal. Information and support for the Metro Region My Way to Go program lineup, including Bike to Work Day, the Go-Tober Challenge, which is just a commuter challenge to get people out of their cars, and other monthly campaigns focused on supporting those alternative commute modes. We provide support for implementation of a pre-tax commute benefit program. So this directly hits on employers can offer their employees a pre-tax alternative transportation benefit, and we can work with them to set that up, and we encourage that. And it lowers a barrier for folks to try things like biking, walking, or transit. We provide a commute visualization map offering anonymous data points that can be used to encourage carpool and van pool formation among employees. This looks something like literally just a picture of a map with a dot near where you might live, so that you can see other people in your area and say, hey, that person's pretty close. Maybe we could carpool to work together. It's a very basic tool, but it's incredibly powerful for people that may not even know that someone in their office, it lives so close to them and they even have the opportunity to carpool. That's a really popular option for us as a work product. And another one of Catherine's products that we work on as a team is an annual customized North Metro commuter survey. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Sorry, that was a lot, but that encompasses pretty much all of our programming. So now that you have an overview of that, let's kind of break it down by the numbers a little bit in terms of 2021 highlights. So I'm just going to run through a few of these slides that show kind of the different events that we did throughout the year and the numbers from those. We've already seen this one. We serve 157 employers, almost 30,000 employees. We hosted a series of quote unquote, thanks for writing, RTD, writer appreciation events. Later last year, toward the end of the year, we hosted 11 events at 6 different stations across the Denver North Metro region. Those were all of the inline stations, including some of the park and rides like Wagon Road Park and Ride on 120th. At those events, we had over 500 rider interactions with over 10 pages of notes with rider comments on them. Everything from the bus schedule is too slow to the ticket machine is in the wrong location. And I know that may not seem overly important, but for RTD planners and service planners, this on-the-ground information from daily commuters is essential and something that they value and they take into consideration. So these were really successful events for us. And then just a little joke here, we provided 8 boxes of coffee because we did them early in the morning, those commute times, and we only spilt 1 cup. I don't think that's true, but we can be generous here today. Our Smart Commute Ebike program kicked off in 2021. This is a loan-to-own, low-income e-bike program that's grant funded through the Colorado Energy Office, along with a few other folks. And we have a program manager that runs this program. So 13,700 minutes were biked across just over 2,000 miles, reducing 4,400 pounds of CO2 in our environment from this e-bike program just in 2021 alone. There were 138 e-bike inquiries, resulting in over 300 interactions with low-income folks in the North Metro region that were interested in a program like this. Our program manager hosted 5 safety training events with 11 income qualified participants that are in the program or have been in the program. I think we're at 9 right now. The reason it's a loan to own program is because they have the bike for 90 days and they're able to ride it and report the data back to an application that they do that with. And if it doesn't work for their lifestyle, then they give it back to us for us to recycle it into the next cycle. Or if it does work for their lifestyle, after that 90-day loan to own period, they own the bike along with all the accessories, and it becomes something that they can use. These are really nice bikes. They're a few $1,000s, and it comes with a lot of accessories. This is lowering a barrier for low-income folks to try an e-bike as a primary transportation mode. It's been really successful, and it's a pilot, first of its kind in a suburban setting. There's been a lot of urban trials, so it's pretty interesting to see people riding to like Amazon at 144th and I-25 from somewhere like Broomfield. The Wagon Road Flex Ride is another service that's in its 2nd year. This is a flex ride that services from the Wagon Road Flex Ride up primarily to the 144th and I-25 quadrant, which has St. Anthony North Health Campus, Amazon Den 3, Fulfillment Facility, Orchard Town Center, and the Denver Premium Outlets, along with a few other folks in that area. This bus takes low-income workers, mostly transit-dependent folks, on a fixed schedule and flexible schedule during the middle of the day, up to their work and back to connect to that Wagon Road Park and Ride. There's no other transit in this area. This is the first of its kind this far north, and there's been almost 30,000 riders. We've probably eclipsed that by this point. That was as of October 2021. There was 124 customer service calls received 24/7 from our program manager. She is out there at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., making this thing tick, which is really, really amazing. This program wouldn't be working without her, Jean Shreve, and I have to shout her out even though she's not here, because it's really amazing what she's been able to accomplish. In 2021, we hosted 11 outreach events just for that flex ride, reaching 58 specific riders during that time. Look at the chat here. Yeah, the Ebike program is really cool, John, and it's something we think has been pretty successful so far. We're going to launch phase 2 of that Ebike program. It's going to be a little bit larger, coming in a couple of months here. It'll even include recumbent bikes for those that are not able to ride a typical bicycle. The employee traffic reduction program, which was that trip reduction program I spoke about earlier a little bit, we spent a lot of time advocating for that in 2021, and we spent over 170 hours in advocacy meetings with regulators, helping write that regulation so that the employers in our area were being treated fairly with a mandate like this. We know that it went away in hindsight, but we spent a lot of time on it. We hosted 32 employer meetings to discuss their commute programs and provided 18 large employers with a customized ETRP, employee traffic reduction program evaluation to make sure they were prepared for a mandate like this. This one on the right here, this is something we like to show that we give a little bit of bang for our buck in terms of other transportation management organizations in the region. You guys know this, 11 board members and 5 staff members, but the average TMO or TMA revenue in the region is $591,964 from last year. And we operate on just over $250,000 a year. So we think we give a lot of bang for our buck, and a lot of those other organizations have some outside funding sources from foundations and tax benefits and things like that we don't get. So we just like to highlight the fact that we think we do a pretty good job for a small little shop. I held off on talking about our North Metro Commuter Survey earlier a little bit. We got 2,300 responses, which is a record number of responses for us on this North Metro Commuter Survey from all 13 jurisdictions in our area. The average commute was 12.8 miles, which is pretty long if you think about it. 28% of those folks drive kids to school or daycare. And the reason we list this is because if you're responsible for taking a kid to or from school, your opportunity to take an alternative transportation mode, think about taking the bus or taking the bike, is greatly diminished. It just becomes much more challenging. And I think that's a very important statistic that Catherine always points out, and something that we have to be really attuned to when we're offering these and trying to promote kind of the alternative transportation modes to people. This page here on the right is the front page of what a report looks like. So we provide reports to all of the companies that ask for this survey. And they fill it out during a specific work week and give their trip data to and from work, and then for that week, and then Catherine spits out this beautiful report that provides some interesting insights into what the North Metro's commuting looks like. So the one you're looking at here is for the whole region, the whole North Metro region. So all 2,343 responses are in this pie chart. Just to quickly say, I'm going to jump down to these two, right? So our traditional drive alone rate in our region is 78%. That means 78% of people that are driving at any given time to or from work are driving alone, and that's not what we want. And I think the biggest difference here will show in terms of between 2021 and 2020. If I can find my cursor here, this big green bar in the middle is pretty large. It's a pretty large piece of the pie, and you can see it's shrunk down here. That is the telework rate going down between 2020 and 2021. So more people were working from home in 2020 than they are in 2021. It's still a significant piece of the pie. It's still a very large piece of the pie, but it's less than it was in 2021, which increased our SOV rate or single occupancy vehicle rate up 17% to 78%. So we're kind of self-correcting in the marketplace a little bit on commuting is why I dive into that side story for a sec. And all of those reports are on our website from years past, so you can look at them from years past and see the trends kind of across time between the commuting patterns in the North Metro region. So you heard a little bit about what we've done in the past in 2021 and our successes and failures. Here's our strategic goals for 2022. Now that we're already almost in March, unbelievable. We are well underway with revamping and refreshing our Smart Commute identity and website. So that's going to look like a new logo and a totally redone website. That's coming very soon for us. That's really exciting. We're going to focus on our business employer outreach program support. That's that massive text list that I showed you earlier. We continue to do that. That's what we're grant funded to do, is provide that support to employers and employees across our region. So that's a primary focus for us. We're also going to look at a regional bike network connectivity data collection project. We were lucky enough to receive a small grant to start collecting some data on gap analysis between jurisdictions for those regional trails. We're really interested in getting a more full picture of what the regional trails look like in the entire North Metro region, so that people could ride from Brighton to Broomfield or Longmont down to Thornton and realize that there is a way to do that. Or if there's not, we can identify those gaps and push for funding to get some of those trails done. So that's going to be one of our focuses in 2022. We're going to continue to focus on first and last mile strategies, including our Ebike program and flex ride programs. We have a lot of regional transit in our area that takes you to and from places like downtown Denver, but that first and last mile is still a big challenge for us. And having things like an e-bike to get you from where the bus lets off to your work or your house is still really important. And Smart Commute Metro North support of grant opportunities. There's a lot of federal funding in the transportation space right now. So we're going to continue to advocate for improved funding for things like State Highway 7's bus rapid transit program that should be coming down the pike, the mobility hub at I-25 and State Highway 7, and continued funding for I-25 improvements, especially safety improvements in the middle of the corridor. That is it for me. I'm happy to take questions, but I probably went too long, so I'm also happy to just pass it right along to Catherine.
Good evening, and thank you, Carson. After Carson's great overview of Smart Commute as an organization, I'm going to walk us through a specific service, one of those employer services that Carson outlined earlier, that we're offering to businesses who are interested in evaluating their emissions due to commuting. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, Carson. Our commute footprint analysis is specifically targeted to the negative externalities that are due to employee commuting. Employee commuting often falls outside of the perceived business operations, but data shows that the availability of commuter programs at the employer level has a substantial impact on the commute modes an employee uses to get to the office. It's kind of a no-brainer that if an employer is offering these resources at the business, it's more likely that employees are going to avail themselves of other commute choices. So employers do play a role even in commuting. Even if they don't offer a commute program, even a different and more open attitude at the employer level can help empower employees to review their non-drive alone options and maybe make a different choice. And accounting for emissions and fuel consumption and fuel costs are some of those negative externalities that are simply ignored at that workforce level. Additionally, it's completely possible to generate a reasonable and acceptable figure for fuel consumption, for emissions, and for fuel costs. And it really takes very little effort to do this analysis, to do that kind of calculation. Making this effort does make it possible to incorporate commuting costs into sustainability accounting. For instance, the EPA Scope 3 inventory, which we recently worked with an employer on. Finally, it's good to start measuring commuting costs right now, even if we're afraid to see what those costs look like after analysis. It's hard to look at the negatives that are happening in the system that we are linked to strongly. But it's important to look at those costs because it allows us to start doing some benchmarking, and we can therefore see progress over time. This is probably an issue that I'm preaching to the choir on, I would expect. We can go to the next slide, Carson. The commute footprint analysis process is really simple and very straightforward. It starts with a meeting with an employer. We like to collect some baseline information from them, information like the employer's policy for PTO, sick leave, and vacation days. We also find out about holidays, and we also find out about normal business operations so that we can make a reasonable extrapolation across a business's entire year and then provide that to them in the reports analysis. At our meeting, we also identify an absolute minimum response rate. 100% response is honestly ideal. And we do craft the survey so it literally takes minutes to respond to, so it's very easy to access. But anyone that's done surveys understands that a 100% response rate is just really extremely rare. We use statistics in our meeting to determine that absolute lowest necessary response rate so that we can yield a reasonable analysis for the employer. And then we agree with that together on this number in the meeting. We collect employee responses via that online survey, and the employer is responsible for sending that survey out to their staff. And they're also responsible for sending reminders out. And I know there's a strong correlation with an employer sending those reminders and an increase in response rate. So simply being a nuisance is very effective to trying to get a higher response rate. Seeing that over and over and over again. And then at that point, once the data is in, we take over and we complete the rest of the analysis. We are able to populate our calculator with the figures from their survey, and then we meet to discuss our initial findings and then determine a final format for our report. And the final format really depends on what an employer plans to do with the analysis. So we have a discussion about what they want to have as a final product. All right, you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Carson. All right, this slide shows a calculator from one of our recent employers. We were able to populate basic figures for this calculator from our data analysis. And from that, our calculator output outlines a footprint in 3 categories: in fuel consumption, in emissions, and in fuel expense. It also generates an organizational level footprint as well as an estimated employee level average footprint. So it's an average because there's quite a diverse spread of employees' habits and the fuel economy of their cars. So we can give them the average on the individual level. And we also provide a time frame breakdown for weekly and yearly. So across the year, the footprint that an employer is incurring. And you also know on a weekly basis as well. And I think that both of those figures are really helpful to understanding and being able to visualize the impact that commuting can have on an employer. Something that I technically call this a commute footprint analysis, not a carbon footprint analysis, because we're really specifically addressing commute related carbon. We're not doing the entire from cradle to grave analysis on a vehicle. And there's a lot of analysis that incorporates that. And so we want this to be able to be an add-in and not conflict with any of the data that is often provided in carbon footprint analyses. All right, you can go to the next slide, Carson. So the commute footprint analysis, just like a carbon footprint analysis, is intrinsically negative. It's just part of the analysis as you're kind of looking at what you're spending, what your cost is. However, when it comes to commuting, we can actually kind of flip the switch and we can look at this information in a more positive way, because with these baseline figures, we can generate a worst case scenario baseline. And then we can compare their outcomes from the calculator to that worst case scenario baseline. And so we're able to actually show a business or an employer what its savings calculation is. And that's really helpful to our work, because we want to make the case that the good work an employer is already doing is having a positive effect. Their policies around teleworking and compressed work week, how they promote bike to work day, how they engage with us on our other programs, those are all going to roll the ball forward. And we want to be able to kind of give the employer an attaboy for that. But we do return to the fact that a commute footprint is negative, that commuting has negative externalities that are trackable, and that this is something that we can start making progress on as well. All right, we can go on to the next slide, Carson. So this slide shows our service one-sheeter right there on the left side. And this helps us to market this option to employers. There is a cost for this analysis, but it covers the time that it takes for the staff resources, so it's pretty darn reasonable. And at the end of analysis, we provide the populated Commute Footprint Analysis calculator. We provide that custom report with the detailed breakdown of the complete analysis. And we also provide some customized next steps and recommendations to them to keep making progress. So we take a look at their data, where they had some strengths, especially after our conversations in that initial meeting, and understanding their workforce and their industry. And we make recommendations to them to continue to try to reduce the emissions that are generated due to commuting. We can go on to the next slide, which is, I believe, our wrap-up slide. It is. So that's the end of our presentation today. My segment was fairly short and straightforward, but we have a lot of time for questions if anyone has any.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. If you want to just stop your screen share, then we can kind of see everyone here, and perfect. One question that I had is, with your commute footprint analysis, are you estimating that everyone is driving a gas vehicle versus like an electric car or something like that?
That's some of the data that we have to collect, is we have to ask people to self-identify, like for their primary as well as a secondary commute vehicle, like what their, we can either do make, model, and I look it up myself, or they provide us with the actual fuel economy of their vehicle, and whether it's a zero emitting vehicle, a ZEV, which of course is great for these commute footprint analyses because they're not generating anything as far as a tailpipe emission. Or we are able to really look critically at the gas guzzlers as well and incorporate that into our analysis. So yeah.
Got it. Good to know. I was like, I hope it's not like estimating everyone's just driving like a gas car.
No.
So that's perfect.
And frankly, if an employer provides on-site charging, it has a substantial impact on an employer or an employee's ability, or I guess final decision when they're at the point where they need to get a new car. They're much more likely, like 6.5 times more likely, to choose a ZEV if charging is provided at their work site. So that's something that we do see a strong correlation with, and we definitely want to support businesses because that's a tactic that they are using to make sure that a sustainable commute is more accessible to their employees. We would love those employees who are driving in a ZEV to also carpool. That's like really great for us. But yeah, it's at least good that they're not getting that tailpipe emissions, and they definitely get like the credit and the analysis for that.
Awesome. Thank you. If anyone else has questions, feel free to just jump in and ask them here.
I'll jump in. And when I asked this question, I want to make it clear, like, we're on the same team and we both want the same goals. So why is it still so hard to do the right thing? Why is it still such a challenge to take the bus or ride a bike or ride share or whatever, compared to just like hopping in your car and going, compared to all the advocacy organizations out there, and we all want the same thing. What do we need to do better in order to make the future better?
So what we do is technically called transportation demand management. And so we are like managing the demand on the existing transportation system. And that relies on really strong infrastructure to be in place, right? And I know I've been doing this for like over 10 years at this point. I have a planning degree, and the impact that the built environment has on choice is cannot be overstated. And so what's difficult, I've always worked in suburban sited employers. Like I've never worked in a downtown environment. So I'm really empathetic with the constraints that an employer has based on their environment. We have lower transit access. Sometimes jurisdictions haven't been forward thinking about the like active transportation infrastructure that they've built over the years. And I think most of our jurisdictions are starting to really develop exciting plans for that active transportation infrastructure. And Broomfield's done a really nice job preserving a lot of those connections. I think the next focus with a lot of jurisdictions out here is about transportation, which means more direct connections. Just talking to the end users all the time, they say, you know, I live in such and such a cul-de-sac community and I work here, and how am I going to get back and forth? And they are making choices about where to live and work that are really causing a significant barrier. And they don't even have the imagination to see that they could make another choice. And that's actually one of the main reasons that we ask people if they're responsible for the transportation of children. It isn't that someone can't bike and take a child to work. We know people that do that. It's that they lack the imagination in their perceptions. Their perceptions are already so constrained that we already have to convince them that it's possible. And then we have to get them to like sit down with us and make a plan. It's much easier to go after those low-hanging fruits of the people that aren't responsible for the transportation of children, to try to deliver them with the plan that they need to feel confident in their choice. And I do this work because I believe that we make a difference. When someone starts biking to work, they immediately talk about how beneficial it is to their quality of life, how much less stress they have. When someone starts carpooling, it's super awkward at first. And they're like, how can I possibly talk with another person? Like, what's it going to be like in a car? But I've talked to those folks after time, and they really see so much value in it. And actually with carpooling and vanpooling in particular, they start to realize that there's great networking opportunities, that they're making connections that are beneficial to their business selves, not just like their personal selves. With transit, I know stories where people have dropped one of their vehicles and gone to a single car family, which when you say that to some people, they're like they dropped a car, like what happened to them financially? Like that sounds like you made their life worse. But the way that they're seeing this is, we don't need this vehicle. We don't need to be dumping our money into it all the time. We can go to one car, which I think everyone here understands that perspective. So as someone that has been doing this for like a long time, yeah, we're all working together, but the constraints of our infrastructure are like a huge barrier. And so we do need to make sure that we show up to planning meetings and we emphasize to our planners that we agree with the plans and the vision that they have in mind when it comes to trying to lift up all of the other modes and maybe take away the primacy of that single occupant vehicle driver on the road. Sorry, really long, passionate explanation. I get caught up into this. You probably do too.
Yes, very much. Yeah, thank you for that response. I certainly appreciate it. Yeah, and I think attitude has a lot to do with it, like you said, and infrastructure, and I'm sure funding as well. So if there's anything that we can do to help, then out.
That's awesome. My boss was just talking about a book she was given for like a carbon light or a carbon neutral vacation plan for Europe. And I guess that has all these great ideas. And we were chuckling about like how difficult it would be to write a book like that for the United States. And it's just to our own detriment because we haven't put that. I mean, the infrastructure is difficult, and then the lack of imagination with most of us. We've just been overly programmed by car culture to like not even have the imagination to see things differently. Because you can go right over to Glenwood Springs on the Amtrak and you can walk all around in that town. And a lot of our communities are the same way, that you can do it if you actually look into those resources, but it's not the same way as a European vacation and the access that they have due to their infrastructure. Long ways to go, and funding is a part of that.
How do you guys reach out to these businesses? Do they approach you, or do you just kind of contact them and say, hey, would you like one of these analysis for your business, or what happens there?
Yeah, I think in general, I think we end up having mutual connections with folks just through our existing work, and we'll hear about a business that may need or want some help. We also do a lot of kind of cold prospecting, and we, as you saw on our membership list, we partner with a lot of chambers and economic partnership groups, and we're in those meetings with their businesses that are there in the room to say, hey, we're here as a resource too. We're a nonprofit. We offer free stuff. If you're interested in helping your employees improve their commutes, then we're here to do that. So I think those are kind of the primary ways. In terms of the commute footprint analysis, I think that comes as a second stage, right? So we'll identify, unless we get a specific inquiry, which that can happen, but I think those are typically our more active members that are interested in partnering with us on commute options. And then they approach us and say, hey, we're interested in what our commute footprint analysis might look like, and we can run from there.
Got it. Thanks. Anybody else
Yeah,
have any questions?
Yeah, I actually do have one question. So I know you guys are like targeting like employees as well as like individuals, but I was wondering what you guys are doing like on the school level to kind of target, like, I know you said like 28% of people drive kids to school. So I was wondering if you have any like plans in place to target maybe even like high schoolers or things like that.
That's a great question. So high schoolers are like programs for them I am less familiar with. We have a regional level school pool program. My very good friend and colleague, Mia Bemelin, operates that at the regional level. And what school pool does is it helps to facilitate the formation of school-based carpools for parents, as well as walking groups and biking groups. We are actually in Denver. We have one of the best school pool programs in the nation, if not the single best. Half the year, Mia, as I mentioned earlier, she gets calls from other regions of the country, trying to find out what we are doing here to make our program so successful. That being said, I think we're trying to really solve, I think, and provide support for like the choice system as well, which it's hard to deliver transportation solutions at a district level for a school where parents can come from all over the region. And so school pool is really good for those cases in particular, but that generates so much traffic in neighborhoods, and it really relies on the willingness of parents to agree to a carpool configuration and the open seats in cars. I have 4 kids, so I only recently was able to start carpooling with another family in my neighborhood to school because we didn't have enough car seats for a while for us to get all of our kids in. But it's most of the time parents are like very open to carpooling because they want to get out of that back and forth chauffeuring grind. High schoolers, I'd need to investigate. You may be better aware of this than I am, if they're even permitted to like ride with their peers or if it has to be with family members still. I'm like a little out of the loop on that. I don't have a driving age child quite yet.
Yeah, I think for like new drivers, you have to wait like 6 months after you get your license. But like another idea could be like maybe doing like e-bikes for like kids who live close to their school, because like that would be pretty easy and like I guess accessible.
That's a great idea for a grant application if the opportunity arises again. We have the Ebike program that Carson described and that we're really excited about and has had great benefits because it came through like a really specific niche grant for e-bikes. So we'll have to watch out for that one to see if we can hook up high schoolers with like e-bikes, which would be great to get them started early in life with some confidence in that mode, and maybe they don't have to buy cars later on in life because they know that you can get a lot of places on a bike.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if you could create one of those like connection map thingies that high schoolers could sign up for so they can see like, oh, here's the other high schoolers in my area who drive, or maybe who need you could have it as like, I need a ride, or I can drive, I'm like legally allowed to, and then they can, click and try and connect with one another. Kind of like that other map system that you guys were talking about before.
It might be something that is a tool that's used. I'm just not familiar with it. You guys might be interested in having our school pool regional coordinator come on and like talk about her program a little bit. One thing that's difficult with schools is that some legislation at the state level has passed in the last couple of years, which significantly constrains the school's ability to allow a third party access to school information, like things like where a family originates from. Like that has been a pretty profound change in the law and what schools are able to do. And so that has constrained the program a bit, but I think there's been some creative workarounds. And I guess it depends upon, I don't know how much parental consent would be required. And that's definitely outside of my wheelhouse of expertise. But that's something that occurs to me. But it's kind of like the low hanging fruit that these kids could drive together in groups from different parts of the metro. And they are experiencing carpooling as a mode, and that it isn't horrible, and that it's something that you can do and it's beneficial. It saves yourself, like these kids that are buying their own gas. It was 99 cents a gallon when I was in high school. So it's substantially more. And it was hard for me to fill my tank. So carpooling is a great idea.
Yeah, I feel like it could even be started kind of within the school, like, hey, can you find other kids around you to carpool with? And, if you're allowed to and stuff, but there's always so much legality with kids involved. So it makes things a little tricky sometimes. Any other questions or thoughts here?
Yeah, quick question. Has there been any movement or desire for a private tree solution like bike share, scooter rentals, some of the stuff that like other cities in Colorado are doing? Are there any cities in your region that are talking about bike share or scooters on the streets, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, this is funny you say that, John. I have a meeting tomorrow morning with Bird, and they're thinking about deploying, and they're planning on deploying in Thornton, city of Thornton. And they also said they're planning on deploying in the city of Brighton. Those are the only two I've heard of recently. And I think it's only the scooter product from them. I haven't heard anything about a bike share product, dockless or docked. But yeah, it sounds like the scooter micromobility world is kind of making its way back up to the suburban areas. I think it started out, there was a bike share plan before I got to Smart Commute, and a whole grant application, and there were vendors, and it was going to be happening in and around kind of the region and city of Thornton. So, but the vendors backed out because the business model didn't quite work for them at a suburban level, which is not that surprising. But it sounds like they figured out a way to make these things work at a suburban level, so that they're bringing them back. And I think we're going to have to watch and see what the market allows. As you know, a lot of those companies just kind of do what they want as long as the code allows, which sounds crazy, but I was working in the city of Denver when Lime dropped all those scooters on the street one night, and it was crazy. So it's kind of a wild west out there when it comes to both when they drop them, how they drop them, and the code that follows suit. Good question.
Smart Commute have a position on whether you're for or against or neutral on micromobility and scooters and things like that?
I think for the most part, we're probably positive in terms of it's an option, right? It's a good micromobility option that's not in a car alone. I think we would advocate, if we're going to advocate for anything in tandem with it, it's good infrastructure and good city code that allows for safe riding of those vehicles, because I mean, you can just picture it now, right? Someone riding up and down Federal or Sheridan on a scooter is just terrifying. So you just don't want that to be the case. So I think we would advocate for those two things alongside a micromobility option.
Wider sidewalks and protected lanes and that kind of stuff. I think it could be a really useful last mile solution for the suburbs. So like the bus will get you 80% of the way there, 85% of the way there, and then that last little bit that you don't want to walk could be filled with something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we've seen that a lot around the country. I think, yeah, I think it's a solution of the future for sure.
Awesome. And I think in the chat, we just have a nice link here to the Boulder Valley School District Safe Routes to School. Thank you for that. And Julie had commented, she said, love how the future is looking, love that the community is engaged with the progress and ideas. So thank you, Julie. Any other questions or comments or anything? All right. Well, I would like to thank Carson and Catherine for their wonderful presentation. A lot of great information that I definitely didn't know about. And I love what you guys and your organization is doing. And we're definitely want to just keep helping you out, and you can keep helping us out, and we'll keep promoting each other on our websites and so forth, and keep us updated on any new developments you have. So everything you're doing is wonderful. Thanks again. All right, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Any other final comments or anything?
I was just going to say you're doing great work too. So let's not let that slip by. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye.